It's just
Wow.
average. Below average.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's funny because
The
I
volume,
couldn't hear
not you.
Stafford forever. I couldn't hear Stafford forever.
Oh,
So,
really?
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, this
This is how.
is
Yeah.
the
junk
compelling
show.
behind the scenes stuff.
So,
You know?
have you both seen Barbie now?
Yes.
I was just
Dude,
telling Mike I completed the Barbenheimer challenge.
Oh,
this
did you
week.
really?
Yeah.
Well done.
Good for you,
Well
man.
done.
Have you, Mike?
I've not. I'm
You've only-
waiting for Steve.
you're halfway?
I'm waiting for Steve to come down.
Yeah.
Guys, let's talk.
Let's
talk.
laughed nonstop. It just was
Who
brilliant.
do you think? Tim and I were just debating who's more attractive, Margot Robbie or Ryan Gosling. And I said I prefer Ryan Reynolds
Oh,
to
yeah.
Ryan Gosling. That's a hot take. And so I'm going to go Robbie. Stafford, what's your vote?
She's beautiful, but Gosling gets me every time.
Okay, that's fair. Tim,
That's really
Gombis,
interesting.
you are the tiebreaker.
Man, that is not a difficult question for me. I think Margot Robbie is beautiful.
She is gorgeous. And she's so good in it.
Oh, my word. She's hilarious, too.
Gombis, have you ever listened to Dead Man's Bones?
No. What is it?
It is Ryan Gosling's band that's kind of like inspired by the Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland.
Oh, really?
And it is amazing.
Huh.
It's like one of my favorite records.
Dead Man's
Of course
Bones.
it is. It probably deals with death and bones.
It's very Halloween.
And yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Tim Gombis, what is your? We're just gonna call you Gombis.
Cool.
And I love Gombis because it's a noun and a verb. You've been Gombist.
These are all episode titles.
Yes. But Gombis, what? Oh, I lost my question on that witty quip about your
Dead Man's Bones,
name.
Disneyland
Yeah.
ride.
Oh, what's your favorite holiday?
My favorite holiday? Probably Arbor Day.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
And Boxing Day. Follow
I
closely
like
by Flag Day.
Unboxing Day.
My favorite holiday, man, it's got to be either Thanksgiving or Christmas. Probably just Christmas Day. That's just the reality.
Yep. What would you?
Always has been
what would
great.
you- What would you think about a man whose favorite holiday is Halloween?
I would say he is doubtless a person of unusual depth.
Oh. I'm going to take that to the bank.
I want to know more.
Tim Stafford's bio. I'm a person of unusual depth. Perfect. Speaking of
Profound
volume.
depth.
Let's talk a little Barbie, guys. I mean, because I went to see it on assignment from the Tims.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I was not initially planning to. My son, it was interesting. My oldest son came home and said he was like near tears a couple of times. And I was like,
Me too.
I didn't imagine how that could happen at the Barbie movie. And I was pleasantly surprised at the themes. It's kind of like Stafford, the depth
That's right.
of
I am
of
myself
the
strange
movie.
and unusual.
Yes. So what stood out?
You go first, Gombis. What was it?
Man, what stood out? All right, well, what stood out to me was I thought it was really clever to have Ken go through that whole struggle of like his identity and like having had an identity that was only through the female gaze. That and to have that be so foreign, so that the patriarchy in which we all inhabit, to have Ken's experience be so foreign that it makes you actually see the contours of the patriarchy, and that that Ken had no idea like who he was. I mean, this all seems so simple. I feel so. As a guy, I just feel so stupid for like rehearsing the basic contours of every woman's experience in North America. So it's just like, but you guys know how it is, because it's just not what your experience is. You just don't understand it. It's like you have to. So that was really interesting to see that. I thought the device was really brilliant. I thought sort of the never-ending cascade of just clever ideas and like witticisms from the writers, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach. I thought it was just like, it just was brilliant. I mean, it was constant. I mean, just the fact that they were singing that Indigo Girls song, constantly. That I thought that was great.
And then the Matchbox 20 song, which I will never hear again the same way.
Oh yeah, totally.
Which was perfect. I want to push you around.
That was just hilarious, and the way that they sang it too. The way they're like, totally. Just, I could not stop laughing in the theater. It was great.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm sure there's much more to say. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Somebody was talking about recently, it wasn't about Barbie, but it was about comedy and kind of where comedians have been lately, having to watch, comedy used to always kind of be something that was sharp and nobody was off limits. And it was just kind of like, you didn't know what was going to happen. And there's a little bit of danger to that. And how a lot of comedians are a little bit nervous these days with what they can and can't talk about. And how just what that struggle looks like. And, as the pendulum swings from one side to the other, things get kind of extreme. But the comedian was talking about just how potent the use of satire has been to expose just things that are wrong in society for so long. Satire has been such a unique tool for doing that, because it almost tricks the audience member into agreeing with something they might not agree with, or seeing something that they weren't looking for, and then it reveals it to them. And so looking at this through that lens, exactly that, like some of the comedy was so heavy-handed on purpose, because it was taking you, while you're laughing, you're being you're so much is being revealed to you, and it's such a smart technique, rather than just having these like jabs over and over again. The satire just slowly unveils all these things. At the end, you're like, oh man, like I just was like exposed to all these different ideas, but I was doing it while laughing or watching a ridiculous song, or plastic castles and that kind of stuff. So it's it shows the intelligence of the writers through a pink Corvette plastic movie.
Well, that was a theme that really stood out, was the incarnation, right? The choice of incarnation, the choice to be fully human as opposed to live in the fantasy of humanness. Like Barbie encounters suffering through flat feet and cellulite, and then is given this matrixy choice between the Birkenstock and the high-heeled shoe. And at the end, she chooses to be real. And I was talking to the spoilers galore. And we're going to call this episode, which I thought was funny, none of you commented on, 3 Men and a Barbie. I thought that was funny and witty, and none of you on our text thread said anything about that. I'm Tom Selleck, by the way, just in that cast of characters. So anyone over 40 will understand that. Nobody else will. But it reminded me a little bit of The Matrix, of course, on purpose. I mean, that was the genius. But that the choice to be fully human and all that entails, and that montage of moms that the creator kind of shows Barbie, like, are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
I just thought, whoa, what a great picture of incarnation, that, and it turned out like that montage those were family films from the cast and crew.
Oh,
so
really?
It was super. Yeah. It was super.
Wow.
At least that's what I read.
Well, and the older woman on the bench, do you guys know who she was at the bus stop?
No, who was that?
She was the creator of Barbie's daughter. She was the Barbara. She was the one that Barbie was.
Oh, really?
Created for. So it just got a little extra. That one tugged at the tear ducts a little bit.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. I know. And then I thought, I mean, I'm sorry guys, I'm bringing so much Bible to this party, but
Who brought the Bible to the Barbie party?
that's right. That's right. But it just seemed like this perfect illustration of Genesis 3, right? And the upside down. So what was mutual and reciprocal now has become hierarchical. And the subtle nuance that neither matriarchy or patriarchy solves the question, only mutuality and companionship and partnership. I just that Ken has the experience of ruling and he hates it. He's miserable. When he realized it didn't have anything to do with horses.
That's just the best part. All the horses everywhere. Everywhere. It was just brilliant.
So ridiculous.
Yeah, it was.
So yeah, go ahead.
No, I just the horses. I couldn't get enough of that. That he thought patriarchy was about like men and horses.
Yeah, men and horses. Horses are men extenders.
Oh man.
But he's miserable even in that space, right? So the feminine gaze space doesn't work for him. And then let's reverse that so that Barbie's the accessory rather than Ken. Neither of those spaces worked. I just thought that was really it was a step further than I was expecting.
Yeah. Yeah, somebody put a plot or tweeted a plot thing. They're like, Barbie is anti-men. There's an entire plot line about how boys are not taught how to deal with their emotions. So instead they cling to the patriarchy and actually get denied an identity separate from masculinity by the very same patriarchy. So she's just like, what? Like they're just showing everything was as a, I don't know. I thought it was so clever and so well done. And
yeah.
And Kate McKinnon, weird Barbie.
Oh yeah, totally.
She's always a treat and everything.
Yeah, she doesn't do anything like she's just so over the top.
Yeah,
and it was perfect for that. I mean,
yeah.
I thought you could tell that the whole cast was just having an absolute ball. They just, she camps it up. Ryan Gosling camps it up. Everything's just turned up so loud, and it's just so stinking fun.
Well, most of those guys probably don't get to sing and dance in very many movies.
Yeah.
And go to war with suction cup arrows and
oh, totally. Yeah, I thought that was.
We will brilliant. Turn the Kens on themselves.
Yeah,
genius. Yeah, I was surprised at the depth because you get, of course, the instant reactions from both camps, right? This is the new feminist manifesto, which is, poo-pooed by some and welcomed by others. And it wasn't that. It was better than that.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because some of the critiques were, either that it was just this kind of, overly feminist, woke garbage film that, strips joy out of everything. Or there's a lot of people are like, this is not feminist enough. This is like Feminism 101. This is just like an entry-level understanding. But I think that point is correct and is wonderful. Like, I was sitting next to my 11-year-old son and my 7-year-old daughter who loved the movie, and then it provoked conversations about, well, what is feminism? What is patriarchy? What are these words? And how do they fit into our current society? And so I think it was not heavy-handed on purpose, which was brilliant. It provoked conversation and kind of eased and then again, the satire eases you into the conversation unless you're Ben Shapiro. And then it just really pisses you off. And you go buy Barbies to burn in your barbecue. And then rant for 45 minutes.
In your barbecue?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's
it's just insane.
Inevitably something to complain about on the part of everyone.
Always.
But yeah, I think I'm just taking on board what you had to say, Mike, about, it just seemed like there was so much more than that. And it's sort of, and what you were saying, Tim, it just kind of holds up a mirror to so much. It's just revealing. And it is generative of loads of good conversations. And at the same time, I just think it was just so stinking fun. I'd like to
that,
go see it like another 2 times because I didn't get stuck, but I sort of remained at the surface level of just laughing so hard and just sort of enjoying it at that surface level. I need to see it. I need to see it a couple more times because it seems like there's so much cleverness in there.
Yeah, yeah. There and yet there were these moments of such mic drop, profundity, like the character Gloria, who is the real world woman in Barbie Land, and she has this section of quotes where she's saying, on the one hand, we're expected to do this, but on the other hand, we have to do it in this way. Like she talks about being, we're invited into like to be really successful, but as long as that doesn't compromise the standards of femininity our culture has already decided on. You know what I mean?
I found that whole speech this morning and just read it before we started.
Oh yeah, I mean it was, and there were only 5 of us in the theater.
No
but
way.
You could at 9:30 in the
Oh,
morning.
9:30 in the morning.
It was 9:30 in the morning. We had one single guy up there, just who knows what he was doing, and then my daughter and I, and then 2 older women behind us. And there was you could even hear it with just 5 of us, an audible intake of breath on some of those statements, describing, Tim, as you had said earlier, the contours of what it is like to be a woman in 21st century America. On the one hand, there is this great permission and invitation into places of power. On the other hand, there are these strictures that are still very much there.
Yeah.
That almost cancel out, the appearance of empowerment or the experience of empowerment.
Yeah, what I hate about that is one thing that I hate about that is that it's just so, for me, casts the light on male fragility. We want women to be to sort of inhabit themselves fully and to just sort of show up fully in, like, say, a family, church, workplace environment, but the fact that we want them to so fully show up, but then to say something like, look, if this is not working for you, please say something and we can make adjustments. We can all change so that you are, you're thriving or flourishing in this setting, in this relationship or whatever. But then because of, I think, male fragility, it's like, well, but don't be bitchy about it. Or don't be complaining or whiny or, and it's like, so I think what she was getting at there in that speech is just that, when women show up fully, men often just men are just offensive. They don't have the stamina to participate well in I'm saying we don't have the stamina. I want to be confessional.
Indict our stamina.
We don't have the stamina to stay in difficult conversations without attacking or defending or checking out or accusing. And I mean, and I also hate that reality for women. It's just got to be such a difficult experience in workplaces, in churches, and in families, because they've learned, we've taught them, when they use their voices, bad things happen. When they fully show up, bad things happen, and it's just a tragedy. And like you guys have been saying, everyone loses. Yeah.
Well, when she was making that speech, I was thinking about, I don't know why, but I started thinking about the 2016 election and how as soon as we had a woman that was the front runner for the president, to be the president, she immediately, all those things started happening, all those like jokes about like, well, I don't want somebody who is going to, be on their period running the country because we know what women are like when they're like that. And just really playing into this over emotional, out of control nature that a woman has and can't have power because of that. And then we elected the most emotionally like uneven person in history to actually take the presidency. And it's just like, man, to look at the hypocrisy on display in a very simple frame is pretty bananas.
Yeah.
But you just hear all that and the stuff that she was saying, where it's like, you have to be this, but you can't do this. You have to be this, but you can't do this. You have to be this, but you can't do this. Like, it's a tightrope that as soon as one foot comes off, it's like, well, told you so. This is why we can't have women here or there.
Yeah, damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's just, it's awful.
It is. And I didn't, I think me before being married for 20 years plus and having an 18-year-old daughter, she's actually 25, but we clean that up for Christian audiences. She, like, seeing the world through her eyes has been the most enlightening. I just never knew how hard it was. I wish I could go back and date differently. When I was in middle school, high school, college, I just didn't know how hard it was to be a young woman. And that's not to me, that's just that. I even saying that, I hear voices that are like, oh, you're capitulating and, you're a simp or whatever. And you're just like, nah, I just really want to pay attention to the experiences of people around me.
What is a simp?
A simp is somebody who is a man who reorients his entire life around a woman.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So a
know.
Ken, he's a Ken in this case.
You're capitulating to what, Mike?
Well, capitulating that men can't be men anymore because women are, being women. Yeah. So it's a zero-sum game. One of us, we have to, and that's how the movie initially presents, patriarchy, matriarchy. There's no partnership. There's no reciprocity. There's no image bearing. It's simply one loses, so that the other can be prominent.
Yeah.
And the movie does a great job showing how untenable that is for everybody, the prominent one and the less prominent one.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like an attitude like that you're mentioning, an attitude like that is an instance of male fragility. It's like it is an act of banging one spoon on the high chair tray, and it's just completely it seems to me to be profoundly immature and also profoundly unchristian, in the sense that the film can be taken as an invitation to put on a heart of compassion for men, to put on a heart of compassion. Like, what is life like in the United States of America for women? Here's an exercise. Here's an instance where we can learn. Like,
why are we threatened by even asking that question?
Yeah, I think that's an instance of male fragility. Like, men can't be men anymore. Or, I mean, you hear this in conservative white evangelical spaces. The biggest threat to the church is the feminization of men, which to situate that kind of an attitude, it's really helpful to read Jason Stanley's book, How Fascism Works, and it's really helpful to read Pankaj Mishra's book, The Age of Anger, because they both talk about that. They both talk about fascistic impulses that where men sort of try to kind of rev up their masculinity out of fears of the possibility of internal femininity and wanting to rid themselves of any hint of femininity. So like there's like the denial of softer emotions, or bury those. And and that requires that requires also the subjugation of women. That's all. It's all part of like a fascistic, which conservative white evangelical spaces are largely fascistic. They're ruled by men. They're ruled by a singular leader. They end up being cults of personality, and so they have to involve the subordination of women. So people like, I don't think it's, well, I'll take whatever shots come my way for this.
Take them.
You said it, Tim. You mentioned who is that? Okay, here.
Do it.
Who's that pipsqueak that you mentioned earlier? I can't remember his name.
Ben Shapiro,
the angry,
the weasel.
Oh, Ben Shapiro.
Weasel.
Yeah, who has because all this is in play, but it seems to me that he has something like small man syndrome. Where he, realizes or feels it's an existential experience of smallness, and so he, it's necessary for him to sort of root out any kind of internalized, softness. He doesn't want to be soft. He doesn't want to be small. He wants to, sort of flex his muscles and be as masculine as possible, and that requires him to get angry. Well, anger.
Buy Barbies and burn them in a barbecue.
Yeah, but he's got to do all of that. It's really unfortunate.
Kevin
it's really sad.
Has smallness syndrome too, but we won't discuss that.
So you can't have men expressing softness or care or compassion or a sense of humor or a sense of humor that doesn't involve attacking people.
Well, the reason I texted you guys is because I was having a conversation with friends about the God is not in control theme. And so then I went to see these movies with all that in my head, both Oppenheimer and Barbie. And our need to, so like a Ben Shapiro, our need to manifest, to control the narrative on everything. Like we want to, and then we want to do that through the lens of like, my thoughts are ordained, therefore my seeking control is seeking control for God, to show God's control over all situations. And so with what you're just talking about with that, did you guys watch the Woodstock 1999 documentary?
Yes.
Holy moly. So it's a microcosm of what you're saying, or like not, or just like an explosion, the end result of, because they're like, part of what happened at that concert was things were going so good. Like the economy was doing great. Everybody was kind of doing great in America, and white men had nothing to be really angry about. And they get to this festival with all this angry music, and they like manifest anger. And so there's just like tons of rapes happened at this concert. Tons of like violence happened at this concert. They set the whole thing on fire. Or if you remember, like they were burning down structures in the thing. They had to stop the concert a couple times. And it was like, this is what happens when like white men don't have anything to be angry about. They manifest it. They find something to be threatened by and then react to it. Yeah. And then make a bunch of victims out of it. And it was like that. There's something about that mentality that starts at one point, and this is how you see the inevitable result of it, is this overflow of that
violence.
Thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Pankaj Mishra, he said, he went through a whole litany of, and they're all white men, writers over the last 150 years who just, who found, like American and a couple of European writers who found places in the world where there was warfare, and like they went and joined foreign armies just to have like violent adventures. Is crazy. Yeah.
Well, that was Eldridge argued that we need a battle to fight.
Exactly. Yeah, it's that kind of masculinity. I mean, every man needs a battle or something like that instead of like. I think that's just a manifestation of that. That's not a manifestation of strength. It's a manifestation, to me, it seems, of like fragility. And I think it's what's interesting, Tim, as you're pointing out, just to make the connection explicit, is in those white evangelical spaces, the white conservative evangelical spaces, and especially among the preachers and leaders of those environments, it seems to me that that's where you have like the most emphasis on like God being a controlling God, because those people are controlling people. So it's like it's all projection. It's like you cannot have a God who is actually soft and relational, who is in genuine relation, whose heart breaks. I mean, all of the feminine characteristics, quote unquote, they're just soft, emotional relational characteristics of God throughout the Old Testament. And Jesus behaving in those ways, those are embarrassing or something like that, or they're shameful, or they're just forgotten or overlooked or neglected. I just was talking with someone yesterday about that instance. I think it's 1 Samuel 24, where David, he having numbered the people,
right?
Where God, oftentimes, the angel of the Lord is God himself in the Old Testament. And God responds by sending Nathan to offer David to choose between like one of three punishments or whatever. And David's like, how can I even do that? And so God sends the angel of the Lord, who is God, to bring judgment. And then when God sees what God is doing, he's horrified and relents. It's like, oh, like, whoa. So, I mean, you have God being violent and then seeing that happen. Well, God's not violent. It's some kind of like punishment. I'm just saying that because someone made the point that when God brings judgment in the Old Testament, it's never called violence. But you have God acting in this way, and then God seeing it and being revolted. Whereas I think men of a certain type would be like salivating at the thought of God being violent, because white men in America want to be violent because we just have that proclivity toward control, which I think is something really corrupt. Hey, Seth, I just wanted to get all that thought out before I said hi.
Hey, they're saying hi to you, Sethy.
What's up, buddy?
Yep, they see you.
Not crazy about that fuck I read, though.
Oh, that is that. Yeah, that is Gombis. That's right.
Hey, Gombis.
What's up, buddy?
What's up?
What's
Just enjoying a gorgeous Saturday.
Oh. Seth and his older brother just finished their first album.
Really?
Well, yeah, and I use the title, album loosely because it's a lot of one take freestyle rapping over beats. But
That's awesome.
My oldest son Nate, there are two bangers, as he calls them, on the album. One is called Syndrome Down, but Money
Down,
Up.
Money Up.
Yep, and then my favorite one is DIS, disability to get bread, and which is money. Gombis, in case you were wondering. So it's like this ability to get this bread, disability to get this bread. I know.
That's awesome.
I know. And it's just awesome. So we've been listening to that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Hey, congrats.
I think
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal, huh?
Yeah.
I think there's something, as you were talking, I was thinking back to when the man blames the woman.
Oh,
right, literally
totally.
the first inclination. And just all of the men who look around at the church and say the problem is women pastors, or the problem is women's ordination, or the problem is the feminization of men. This is such a dumb thing to say, but how do you just not see that we're doing that over and over and over? This is nothing. This is just Genesis 3 again and again and again and again.
Yeah, seriously.
And that we're not, that what we're fighting for are the conditions between men and women that exist under the curse, not the conditions between men and women that are God's ideal.
Yeah.
And so, just the amount of, because there was this great line, of course, by Gloria saying something like, not only are we responsible for the sins of men, but also for, and it was something like, not only are we responsible for the failures of men, but we are also responsible for like the mistakes we make ourselves or something. It was just this classic statement that no matter what happens, it's damned if you do or damned, if you don't.
Yeah.
And the thing that surprised me is Greta. I read she was like a philosophy major, and you can feel that there's an undertone to it. And it's fascinating to me that there's this huge cultural moment happening. And of course the church decides, nope, we're not going to participate. No thanks. It doesn't line up exactly with everything that we think. So forget it. We're out. And what a massive loss.
Control. Yeah.
That,
what
right?
happened? It's got to control it, shut it down, ignore it, whatever. It's too bad.
Yeah. Well, that raises, I think where Tim's headed is, what does it mean to say that God is sovereign? And you had a great, we did this how many years ago now? You had this, it started as a blog post, and then we brought you on, and it was one of the early times we had you, and good Lord, that's when we realized Gombis was a verb. You were talking about how, God's sovereignty is manifested through human agents.
Yeah.
That's what it means for God to be sovereign, is that they're human agents that have delegated authority. And what a vastly different picture of control that would turn out to be then.
Yeah, control. I think control is just the least helpful way of thinking about God's sovereignty to me. It's just not, it doesn't do any good work. It doesn't, yeah, God is sovereign. That's his own, he's sovereign king is like it's a true statement about him, but it's also a scenario that looks like something. It looks like humans ruling creation on behalf of God. And since that's not happening right now, it doesn't make total sense to say that God is sovereign. I mean, it's a true statement about him, but it's not a true statement about the world. It's a true statement about the coming world, because like the writer of Hebrews says, God, he quotes Psalm 8, God gave to gave to the humans rule, and he crowned them with glory and honor. And he says, but we do not see him ruling now. Like we don't see the human ruling now, but we do see Jesus having gone into the heavenly world, and he like over that world God is sovereign, but over this one he's not, because and that's our problem. Yeah, and
so we flip that upside down, right? Because what does the word control manifest in you? It's like authority and safety, right? In the dumbest version of that. But so everything you just said, we take it and we flip it and say God is in control. Everything is, and then you manifest those distinctions within that all over the place. And it's fascinating because it shows, like, Barbie has that weird take on it, but then you guys didn't see Oppenheimer, but I'm sure you're familiar with the plot.
There's a bomb,
but like the interesting
also the plot of
conversation
Speed.
in that movie. There's a bomb on the bus.
And Liam Neeson is coming out with a new version. How does that guy, how does he have a career? I mean, he was great early, but now he's just phoning it in for the same movie over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah, it's working.
It's just insane.
That's why there's 10 Fast and the Furious
off
movies.
track.
True.
What the interesting conversation in Oppenheimer, amongst many, but one of the main ones is the
No
difference
spoilers.
between. I don't think this spoils. You kind of know how the movie ends. The difference between theory.
I knew how Titanic ends, but it still was a great movie.
In between theory, because all these scientists who are so excited about exploring theory beyond what they've been able to explore, right? So Einstein kind of was an impetus, and then these guys all built off of that, and they're so excited about like these ideas, and they get so wrapped up in the ideas that when it comes to the actual manifestation of why those ideas existed and what they're being used for, it's a dramatically different thing. And not to take them off, Oppenheimer did develop these bombs that were used that killed hundreds of thousands of people. But the conversation about how we, and it's mostly, even in this case too, white men exerting control over a situation, manifesting power and control to literally control the world at war, and dictate how it was going to end without any moral complicity in what was happening. And there's an interesting conversation between Oppenheimer and President Truman that I won't spoil, but in some ways they kind of capitalize on those things of just how much we need to manifest that control over other people's bodies, over other people's lives, over other people's autonomy, other people's safety. And it's pretty wild because that idea. So it's like if God isn't sovereign now, or the sovereignty doesn't play out that way here and now, we've had to reconstruct it in a way that makes sense to us, which inevitably leads to the person that's on the top of the pile
Totally.
exerting that control down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, these are the things that were kind of going through my head during these movies.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out how much we build that control with Legos because we don't see it, or God's not doing it exactly the way that we need him to or want him to, or I don't know. I'm not sure what it is, but
it seems generated by wanting God to be in control. Seems to be generated mostly from our anxieties and our fears and our and it seems to me that Christian people talk about that so much because deep down they know it's not true. And it's like we have to just keep saying it, and because we look around at the world and there simply is no evidence of it. It's like, and then you kind of have a really nice happenstance, like, doggone it, man, I'm feeling a little short of money this week, and I get in the mail an unexpected check. I'm like, oh, God is sovereign, because that happened.
God is good.
Or something
God is
like
good.
that. It's a God thing, or God is good, and instead of looking for the appropriate signs of God's goodness, or instead of realizing people get checks in the mail all the time. I mean, this just happens. This is the kind of thing that happens. I mean, I think it should happen to me more often than less often. But I'm just saying, it's like we try to convince ourselves it is true because the world really does feel out of control.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and also, God's control is not a good way of thinking about God's sovereignty, because what God's sovereignty looks like is humans bringing forth the flourishing of creation and flourishing from creation. Like benefiting from creation, having a reciprocal relationship, like with other people and the creation, but it's not controlling it. In so many ways, it's like clearing space for it, rather than being in control of or determining what things are like for other people. I mean, you said it, Mike, like the ideal scenario is mutuality and partnership. And like, that means, me, drawing out a friend and a friend drawing me out, and clearing space for others to sort of step forward and show up fully and be loved and valued and appreciated and embraced. All those postures are in play. And those are all soft. Those are all relational. Those are all, quote unquote, more feminine. But which is unfortunate to say that, because those ought to be the practices of just people who are Christian, responding to life-giving exhortations to like put on a heart of compassion. Like, what is life like for people who are very different from me? What is life like in people that occupy other social stations? And doing a lot of learning and attending to, instead of like, this is what life's got to be like for you because it benefits me or whatever. And that gives me a feeling of being in control, despite how much that will end up leaving you with a feeling that you're shut down or hemmed in or oppressed or exploited. I mean, anyway.
Oh, that's so good. I have two thoughts immediately out of that. One is, if Genesis 1 and 2 are the sort of the archetypes of how God relates to creation, even the form of that Hebrew verb, right? Let us, or let them. That's not a, I was reading something about it. I don't remember the name. It's a complicated name. Do you know what it is, Gombis?
What?
The form of that verb that it's not a command, it's an invitation.
Oh,
it's like a suggestive. It begins with a P. I don't remember. It's a long word. But even there, he's not let there be light. is different than commanding light. And you're talking about making room and making space, and God just separating.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, the whole pictures of God who isn't using violence against the world, but rather bringing forth. And it was just a very interesting, if the picture of sovereignty is in Genesis 1 and 2, it's nothing like sovereignty as we construe it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, just take the instance
very,
of God
very different.
he brings the man, he takes the man and puts him in the garden, and then sort of parades all the animals in front of him to see what the man will call the animals. So it's like God, he generates a scenario for the man to step forward and enter into what he was created to be, what God wanted him to be. So it's like God's sovereignty looks like people showing up fully as you know. I mean, that's
which gets me.
It was I was thinking about just yesterday about that. Have you guys seen that shoot, what's his name? The guy that made the film. Oh gosh, everything's blanking. His name's Charlie. He's a filmmaker. Charlie. My friend Steve sent it to me. He did like a 5-minute speech at the Golden Globes. He made the film with Will Ferrell. Where a writer is writing Will Ferrell's life, and it's in his head. He can hear it.
Stranger Than Fiction.
Stranger Than Fiction. Who made Stranger Than Fiction? Charlie something.
I don't know.
Doggone it. This is going
Charlie
nowhere.
Sheen, probably.
Hashtag winning.
So he did the speech about like what the world needs is you. What the world needs is me. What the world needs is each person showing up fully as themselves. Like when that happens and we bring our gifts fully into the world and give them to each other and then receive them from each other, that's what God's sovereignty looks like. It doesn't look like you were saying, Mike, the way that we imagine it, it looks like God's sovereignty looks like people getting out of the way. Or like when we say things like this, you know, we showed up to church today. This is not about us. It's about God. We want to put ourselves aside and just kind of like focus on God. It's like, that's exactly what God does not want. You know, God wants us to attend to each other and listen to each other and bring forward what's inside of us. And when we are doing that, we're getting glimpses of God.
Sounds new agey. One of the
but it sounds fun.
One of the things that,
and that's my main criterion.
Way more interesting than the other. Yes, Barbie. One of the things that when you were talking about, you know, Tim, and you've talked about this a lot on your own podcast, but it's really struck me that this kind of work, listening to people from different social locations, clearing space for each other, you know, all the one another's are in the New Testament seem to be clearing space for each other. Be compassionate, be kind, forgive. That's the only way to approach the new humanity, right? Which is Paul's vision for the church, that people of rival social locations would come together as siblings. And this beautiful dynamic where the gospel raises up those that are considered lowly and it brings down those that are considered important and significant. And so, you know, when people will label a conversation inquiring about race or inquiring about, you know, material excess and the disparity between the rich and the poor, or even here with gender, you know, they'll just call that woke and be done with it. It seems like that's just another way to reinforce the existing dynamics that are found in the world. And God seems to very much oppose that, right? In Corinthians,
totally.
I mean, he's zapping them. There's sovereignty for you. Some of the people are falling asleep because they refuse to practice the embodied reciprocity of the Lord's Supper in their fellowship. And so, I mean, it's just ironic to me that we have these big theological categories that explain the perpetual nature of human sin towards each other. You know what I mean? But for some reason, I and others think that we're immune from all of those dynamics, right? Well, we'd never blame women like, Adam did.
Yeah.
Or, we'd never do, what the Corinthians did. And it's like, no, here are all these examples of exactly the same dynamics at play. And it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's the craziest thing that but it exists. And it exists, to me, very prominently in conservative white evangelical spaces. The assumption that because we're obviously God's favorites, we've been given a pass by God. We don't have to do the things that God says. Other people have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just it's insane. It is an insanity. But it's like the kind of Christianity, man, this has been like the critical question I've had in my head for, honestly, this has been like 25 years. How could this have happened? Like, how could the Christian environment in which I was raised quote the Bible so much and be so convinced that we are the insiders to God's work in the world and called to sort of sort everybody else out, and have the assumption that we just don't have to do all this stuff. Like, we don't have to listen to other people. We don't have to learn. We're not the learners. We're the teachers. It is it's a profound arrogance and an insanity, but it's like, I think that version of Christianity is the version of Christianity that basically was the same kind of Christianity that came 400 or 500 years to this land, and with the assumption that they were God's endorsed favorites, which gave them a free pass to murder the original inhabitants of this land, and then to enslave Black Africans and to bring them here for the purposes of the idolatry of money. And it's like that assumption has sort of just kind of wound its way all the way through down into white conservative evangelical Christianity, and it's still there. So what I'm saying is there's an insanity that has to occupy the hearts and minds of a people who would be murderous and who would enslave, and and that kind of insanity has made its way into the Christianity that I inherited. That's the only way I can explain it.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? That's the control thing, right? Real quick. That's why I wanted to have this conversation, or why it was in my head, is exactly that we, as, and I'm using air quotes if you're listening, those who are the chosen people, and then saying, how could you, you guys don't get it, to everyone else outside of that little circle. And then whatever we do within that circle, because we're the chosen, becomes ordained, and then becomes kind of the manifested truth of the land. So literally with that, like manifest destiny or something like that, like it becomes ordained because we're the ones doing it. And that is just, and so now with the examples you just gave, the other thing that I texted you guys was like, now we're debating whether or not slavery was beneficial for those who were enslaved. Dude. And so now we're taking that narrative, and instead of repenting and lamenting, we're reordaining it in a whole new way. And then now you're seeing people in interview, like just everyday people, picking up that narrative that's being used by some of those politicians and carrying it forward. And you're just you're watching it in real time. You're watching this happen in real time. And it's bananas. It is insane.
It's insane. It is insane. And kind of what you were bringing up, Mike, it's like it is the most profound, it's profoundly exact. It is the exact instance of failing to love one's neighbor as oneself. Like, that person over there is benefited by being under control, by having their family separated, by having their spouse raped by an owner. That actually sets that person up for good. Because instead of thinking, do I want to be owned? Do I want to have my spouse raped? Do I want to have my children taken from me? Do I want to be branded? Do I want to desire my freedom but fear being hunted down? I actually don't. I don't want any of those things. So I don't want those things for my neighbor. But so it's like, the governor, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, saying those kinds of things is simply an insane person. It's just nuts. Yeah. It is profoundly crazy. You're exactly right, Tim. Instead of just thinking, the life-giving postures that we could inhabit would be to learn, to confess, to lament. Those are not things that we do with, in a grumpy mood or anything like that. Those are life-giving. It's actually wonderful to learn from other people. It's actually wonderful to have our minds and hearts and souls expanded by having a view of life from a different perspective than our own. But anyway, gosh, it's crazy. You hear people say crazy things. That's what happens like when you in a position of privilege and power and you're responsible to control the bodies of other human beings. I mean, you do go insane.
Okay, this is my fourth attempt to get a Key and Peele sketch reference in here. So have you guys seen the one where Key and Peele and a couple of white people are in a prayer? They're in a prayer meeting. Have you guys seen this?
I don't think I've seen this.
So they're praying. Okay, they're praying for the poor and the marginalized, and it's super evangelical cliche. Like, Lord, be with them. Lord, help them. Lord, just answer our prayer. Lord, show up. And all of a sudden, there's this golden light that filters down onto the coffee table, and it's clearly the voice of and presence of God, who says, "I will answer your prayer. Sell everything and give to the poor."
Totally.
And they have these humorous reactions until finally, one of them says, "I knew this house was haunted," and they run out.
That's awesome.
And isn't that? I mean, it's exactly the unpardonable sin, the blasphemy against the Spirit, attributing to Satan what is actually God's. And attributing to God what is actually Satan in the world. And that seems, I mean, you're just, and I have to, I mean, I don't want us to come across like we're the enlightened ones and all of those other fools, because that's the same dynamic then, right? I mean, if we're not acknowledging our own complicity in these same systems.
I know I'm wrapped up in it, and it's really hard work. It's hard work to actually reorient long-established habits and patterns. It's really difficult work.
Yep.
All
right, I have.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm done.
No.
I'm talking too much.
Never. Are you kidding me? There's no such thing. All right, this is related to God is not in control, but it's an email from a listener who gave me permission, knowing that you were coming on today, to ask this question. So it's a bit of a left turn. Today I learned one of my coworkers has committed suicide. I knew him, had interacted with him, assisted him in some of his endeavors, but never had any deeper interaction with him. He was a young man in the prime of his life. By all appearances, he had the world at his fingertips. He was smart, skilled, talented, vibrant, and seemed to have an exceedingly promising future ahead of him. News of his passing was a shock. Nobody saw it was coming. It's very confusing. I've been on a journey of deconstruction, reconstruction, or whatever it is, for a few years now. I know how I would have responded a few years ago. Quote, he never said the salvation prayer, or, quote, he obviously didn't have any faith, otherwise he wouldn't have killed himself. How disgusting and judgmental I was. The problem is I no longer know how to respond. My heart is broken, as brokenhearted as I am. I can only imagine how brokenhearted Jesus is. For someone to face such hopelessness that death is more hopeful than life is beyond my comprehension. But the Jesus I've come to know knows about this at a far deeper level than any of us can comprehend. So how do I respond? How do I pray for this person? Or can I? I don't know anymore. Right. So speaking of God not being in control and giving his image bearers agency to do even that. How is it? And I have so much respect for the realization that, instantly a lot of us would just judge the person's eternal destiny without any other consideration, you know? And I grew up in a tradition that said suicide was the unforgivable sin because you weren't around to confess it. And so, I don't know, what do you guys think? From Barbie, we started at Barbie, and here we are.
Well, this is appropriate because that's right at the beginning of the film when she's like, "You guys ever think about dying?"
Totally.
No, that's I think I've really I think that question ought to be seen as a remnant of a former way of thinking by that person that you just read. Like, how should I respond? I would want to ask, like, how, like, to be attentive to, like, how am I responding? Like, I can, the true person that I am, cultivating constantly, like, a heart of love and compassion. What am I feeling about this? And what did, I want myself to show up fully and attend to all that I'm feeling and thinking about this person, this beautiful person who's no longer in this world to bring out his gifts and his perspective of wonder and all of that. And my heart is broken. Like, that's the response. And to express all the beauty and grief over this loss. Those are the right if those are whatever the responses of this person are, like, those are the right responses, instead of asking, how should I be responding? Like, I can trust myself and attend to how I am responding, and that's fully appropriate. There's no sort of right way to do it necessarily. I think that we were all raised and trained in that Christian tradition to always be basically distrusting ourselves and knowing, like, from that view of, like, total depravity, or I'm just a wretch or a worm, or I'm terrible, so I can never trust any of my own thoughts and feelings and responses. And it's like, no, I'm actually I'm wonderful. I'm constantly thinking about, you know, how to love my neighbor, and I'm wanting to sort of put off selfishness and learn ever new conversational practices to bring out other people's goodness and to bring my goodness to bear more effectively and fully, to be a blessing to other people. And so, and that's what I'm wanting to do and to cultivate. And that's good. That's good. I'm a gift to other people, and other people are a gift to me, and we can celebrate being human in God's good but unfortunately broken world. That's how we manifest God's sovereignty in the world. And when a situation like this arises, a tragic situation, we can respond with, you know, softened hearts and brokenness and grief and lament, and think about creative ways to see to it that this person's life is celebrated, and the people that feel his absence powerfully and painfully are attended to. Those are seems to me appropriate responses, and there's a lot of possibilities. There's no, like, right way to respond necessarily. There's a lot of room for creativity on a lot of people's part.
Yeah, that's good. My therapist, we've been working on not only noticing but being curious about how I'm responding. So like, what is it in me that has to know what happened to this person, as opposed to just caring for this person or their family? What is it in me that has, like, why do I have to have an opinion about this? I'd want to ask
the question, why isn't it enough to obey Jesus in this situation? Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not told to figure out someone's eternal destiny. I'm told to love my neighbor.
Right.
And so what's the problem here? Why can't I just obey Jesus? Why do I have to do more than that?
Yeah. Guys, I want you to keep talking. I have to use the bathroom right now. So it's just pee, but it's happening, whether I win. Steffi, come here. Okay. All right, you talk to him for a second.
Okay.
Dave's got to use the bathroom.
Mike,
That is
go ahead,
awesome.
Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Great, Dad.
Does that get at a lot of the itches that you wanted scratched, Tim?
Yeah, I think so. Now
Our
with that,
conversation to this point.
yeah, I'm curious about do all these roads just lead to death? I mean, and then how does that reorient Jesus' victory over death? Does that make sense? Like, does our need to manifest? So it's funny that yes, Barbie started with that. Like,
Yeah.
you guys ever think about dying, and then just the absolute avoidance of that conversation, where she had to like kind of flip it around and be like, oh, I mean, I'm dying to
dying of
dance.
fun.
And everyone's like, yeah, let's have fun. And then obviously Oppenheimer is about death. And he even quotes that Hindu, I think it's the Hindu, like I am the
Destroyer of worlds.
death. Yeah. And so
I've become death.
I have become death, the destroyer of worlds, which is heavy hand. And then, what that piece of Hindu scripture is talking about on its own, and then how it works into this larger conversation is like, is this what, when we manifest control, does it lead to death? Like, is that part of what Jesus undoes? I don't know. These are little thoughts that are percolating now to the top as we kind of tear through these different ideas. And even with what Mike just said about having to understand, how did you just say it, Mike, by your therapist, that I have to have an opinion or understand why something happened?
Yeah. What is it in me that I have to have an opinion on everything, or broadcast my opinion on everything, or render a judgment about this person's
that's control too.
destiny.
So it's such an interesting. All those roads lead? So because my therapist is trying to reconnect my head and my heart, and she's like, "You're stuck up here," and so that causes my brain to do exactly that, to have an opinion about everything, to control the narrative of everything, to whatever. And I don't trust my intuition anymore. And she's like, we got to get you out of here and get you down to here, because this is ruining everything. Not that it's inherently bad, but it's just operating as a sole operative.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. All these, Mike, I was just asking, is like, is the inevitable road of all this stuff death? And then how does that reframe how Jesus' victory over death?
Oh,
Because all these roads seem, whether it's Barbie joking about death or Oppenheimer literally leading, and we were talking about the Hindu, have become death, I'm the destroyer of worlds. And
well, remember what that mom says. The creator says to Barbie, we moms stand still in death so that you can look back, daughter, and see how far you've come. Like, death is a huge part of the Barbie movie.
we are what they grow beyond.
Star Wars. That's exactly right. So God has to be in control to manage the existential dread of what it is to be human.
Oh, it's so interesting.
Yeah, because I'm always questing for certainty.
Always. Yes.
What is it?
And to overcome limits.
Yeah. Instead
I read about a CEO that's he's like in his 40s or 50s, trying to make his biological age 18.
Oh wow.
And spending
I've heard of
millions of dollars in this endeavor.
Like reverse his body's aging.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And what is that?
Yeah, the power. What is it? What is the exact expression in Hebrews? What the power, the fear of death is like this, is Satan's strength or something like that, and Jesus
That's right.
takes away that. He takes away the fear of death. Not
There's a whole series
because
in that.
we are going to die, but we want. Yeah, so certainty. Steve said this to me the other day. He's got a quote carved into his bookshelf at his house. Says certainty is a symptom of death. Uncertainty is the pulse of life. And I think we have to, because of our fear and our anxiety, the existential dread, we have got to have a God who is a micromanager and who is in control, because it's because it's so scary to be human and to lean into uncertainties in relationships and in how things go in this world. But gripping so hard just sets us up for so much pain in this world.
Yeah.
And that is the manifestation of really the fallen powers, the powers and authorities. What they did in rebelling against God was to grasp for control of the creation instead of sort of managing on God's behalf its flourishing. I'm just thinking about how in Ephesians 6, they're called cosmos graspers. The powers of darkness in Ephesians 6, cosmos graspers.
Yes.
So it's like they're gripping. I mean, Steve and I say that to each other all the time, man. So and so's he's gripping hard because it's like he's gotta gotta have control of the situation. Can't let go.
Yes.
Can't hold things with an open hand. And I know I'm like that in relationship.
Totally.
It's hard, Mike, to stay curious.
Yes.
To ask questions, not only of ourselves, but of others, and to sort of manage outcomes. We want guaranteed outcomes. That's the fundamental motivation
That's right.
behind the creation of idolatries, is to have guaranteed outcomes.
That's it.
We do not. I mean, in the Old Testament, instead of trusting God to send the rains, it made more sense to offer sacrifices to Baal, so that to worship Baal, so that they could have guaranteed crops. And we want guaranteed outcomes, so we generate a bunch of other idolatries. But
come on. All right,
certainty.
We've covered a lot, guys. We've covered a lot, and Gombis is a hard out, and so
that's right. I got to roll.
We respect your time,
man. It's so great to see you guys. No better way to spend a Saturday morning.
So appreciate you, bro. Thank you. Listen to his podcast. See you. That's what you're doing right now. Is you're switching laundry,
dude. Soft. I prize soft emotions, and I do household chores. I'm doing laundry, and then I got to go meet with a friend.
Nice. Have a great time.
You guys are the best. Love you.
Peace.
See ya.
Appreciate you, bro. See ya.
Peace.
All right, bye. All right, Sephi, you want to do Shema for us?
Yes.
All right, as we close our time today.
The close is service.
Yes, we're not closing our service. We're closing the podcast.
Yeah.
Yes, and every
Israel,
Adonai Elenehu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord alone. Oh, the Lord alone. I messed it up. Love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Amen.
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 Great job, Seth Erie. You're the best. You're the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
wow. You miss all the facial expressions if you're not on YouTube. That's all I have to say.
yep, YouTube.